You are relaxing on the couch in your living room when a sudden, urgent thought arises. You need to write down a phone number, so you get up to fetch a pen from the kitchen. You cross the hallway, step through the doorway, and stop dead in your tracks. Your mind is completely blank. The pressing goal you held just 3 seconds prior has completely vanished. For decades, people have dismissed this disorienting blankness as a momentary lapse in concentration, or worse, an early warning sign of cognitive decline. But researchers call it the doorway effect, and it is a perfectly healthy, highly evolved cognitive mechanism. The human brain does not record reality as an unbroken, continuous video stream. Doing so would require infinite storage capacity and impossible amounts of metabolic energy. Instead, according to cognitive psychologist Gabriel Radvansky's event horizon model, the mind operates as a ruthless editor, continuously segmenting reality into discrete, manageable chapters. Looking at this diagram of the event horizon model, you can see how passing through an architectural threshold signals the brain to conclude the correct chapter. The disorienting feeling of a glitch is actually the user experiencing their brain actively filing away short-term working memory to clear processing capacity for the sensory demands of a completely new environment. To isolate the exact cause of this memory wipe, Radvansky and his team tested subjects in highly controlled virtual reality environments. The severe memory decay, higher error rates, and slower reaction times only occurred when subjects walked that exact same distance through an open virtual doorway. You might assume that if leaving the room caused the forgetting, walking back in would restore the lost context and trigger the memory. The researchers tested this by having participants walk into a new room, and then through a second doorway straight back into the original space. Returning to the initial environment offered absolutely no improvement in memory performance. The memory remained stubbornly elusive. The physical act of transitioning across the threshold acts as an active, irreversible psychological wipe, proving that the brain definitively closes the chapter on the previous space the moment you leave it. Maintaining an immediate goal, like looking for a pen, relies heavily on the brain's spatial working memory network. Specifically, the prefrontal and parietal cortices work together to maintain spatial orientation and hold immediate tasks active in your online workspace. While those cortices manage the immediate workspace, the true orchestrator of the doorway effect lies deeper within the temporal lobe. The hippocampus acts as the brain's scene director. When a person passes through an architectural threshold, the hippocampus receives a sudden influx of altered sensory data and fires a massive spike of activity. This chart graphs the biological timestamp. The pink hippocampal activity line peaks exactly at the 0-second doorway mark, finalizing memory segmentation. The preceding white zone is the default mode network, maintaining internal goals. The green zone shows the sudden shift to external, vigilant attention. The brain must successfully switch gears into this externally focused state to navigate the unfamiliar environment. The unavoidable biological cost of that necessary gear shift is dropping the internal goal you held firmly in your mind just seconds before. If this wipe were an absolute law of cognitive physics, humans would be completely incapable of functioning in any multi-room house. And initially, researchers at Bond University encountered exactly this paradox. When they had students navigate virtual hallways to retrieve objects, their memory remained flawless. They couldn't trigger the doorway effect at all. The researchers realized they were missing a crucial psychological variable. The participants in that initial test were perfectly single-minded. Their working memories were entirely dedicated to the mundane task of remembering the virtual object, and that focus immunized them against the boundary. To truly test the mechanism, they needed to mimic the chaotic reality of daily human existence. They repeated the experiment, but forced participants to perform complex, continuous backward counting tasks while navigating. This deliberately loaded up their limited working memory, pushing their cognitive resources closer to the breaking point. This chart reveals the tipping point. Under low cognitive load, in the gray columns, crossing the doorway barely impacts the error rate. But under high cognitive load, when working memory is strained by multitasking, the doorway causes a massive spike in memory failures. Doorways do not inherently cause forgetting on their own. They serve as the exact physical tipping point. When the brain is overloaded with competing thoughts, the threshold forces the overwhelmed system to prioritize immediate sensory input and dump its fragile short-term cache. Zooming out to deep evolutionary biology reveals that this cognitive flush provides a distinct, life-saving advantage. Consider an early hominid navigating from the enclosed, dark safety of a familiar cave out into a bright, highly variable clearing. Predatory animals frequently lurked near these exact environmental boundaries. If an early human crossed that liminal space, while their working memory was still consumed by thoughts of a stone tool left by the fire, they would be fatally slow to spot a predator in the tall grass. The threshold forces an involuntary focus reset to keep them alive. The modern equivalent of that clearing is just our residential architecture, and the layout of our homes dictates how often we experience this reset. Traditional British homes built to retain heat heavily favor compartmentalized rooms separated by narrow hallways and heavy wooden doors. A simple trip from a lounge to an airing cupboard requires passing multiple rigid visual boundaries, constantly prompting the brain to archive its goals. Modern American architecture often favors open plan designs, minimizing walls between living and dining areas. Yet the visual cortex is exquisitely sensitive. Even a subtle shift from a carpeted floor to kitchen hardwood, or walking under a decorative archway, serves as a mathematically significant event boundary to the brain. Whether you are stepping into a hostile prehistoric clearing or simply fetching dirty boots from a quiet tiled mudroom, the primal hardware remains unchanged. Our brains continue to react to the geometry of doorways as an ancient, non-negotiable signal to prioritize the present over the past. Because this memory wipe is the result of an optimally functioning neural network, it cannot be biologically cured. But by understanding how working memory load interacts with physical space, you can deploy specific behavioral strategies to bypass the mental wipe entirely. The most immediate countermeasure is overt vocalization. Actively speaking your intended action out loud, like muttering, "Get the scissors," before you leave a room, physically utilizes distinct motor and auditory neural pathways. This dual codes the memory and forces your brain into the single-minded focus required to survive the boundary intact. You can also create a physical anchor. Adopting an unusual physical gesture, like tightly crossing two fingers while you walk, creates a semantic placeholder. When your brain inevitably resets in the new room, the weird physical sensation of your crossed fingers serves as a direct, tangible cue to prompt the retrieval of your anchored intention. Finally, there is the threshold pause. If you walk into a new room and feel the characteristic wipe, do not immediately look around for clues. That just floods the system with new sensory data. Instead, stop completely in the doorway, close your eyes, and actively mentally retrace your steps. This allows you to intercept the memory file exactly as your brain is attempting to archive it. The next time you find yourself standing bewildered in the center of your kitchen, with no recollection of what you wanted, don't worry about cognitive decline. It is merely the quiet, efficient hum of a highly sophisticated biological machine executing a necessary factory reset to keep you safe and alert in your current environment.